Welcome, everyone, to the Lion Counseling Podcast. I'm Mark Odland, founder of Lion Counseling and certified EMDR therapist. Our mission is to help men to break free, to heal deep, and to become the lions they were created to be. Today, I'll be talking about a conversation I had with Dr. Jordan Peterson and how it can help you to become a better man and to guard against burnout and bitterness. Make sure to hang on till the end because I have a challenge for you. And if you're willing to accept it, you can put this wisdom into practice in your everyday life. And since you're already here, if you could hit that subscribe button, we'd really appreciate it. It helps us to keep growing the channel and help more men. All right, let's jump in.
Escape the cage now. Be the lion you was destined to be. Born ready for the war, now my effort is free. The level's been set, time to wrestle the beast. Testing my G, it's getting heavy indeed. The struggle I embrace now, never retreat. I see the test.
If you're listening to this, there's a good chance that you already know the name Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. To some, he's a lightning rod. To others, a true lifeline. And to millions of men, including many of you, he's a voice that puts words to a deep ache. The sense that something in this world, maybe even something within us, is wrong, is off. And no one is saying what it is out loud. But Jordan Peterson speaks these things out loud. He speaks about responsibility, order, meaning, and the weight of suffering. But not as problems to avoid or things that are toxic, but as burdens we are called to carry, that we're meant to carry. At Lion Counseling, we sit with men every day who feel that ache inside, men who are strong and successful and respected on the outside, but privately are wrestling with things like anxiety and anger and trauma and spiritual drift. And like Dr. Peterson, we believe that healing begins not through numbing the pain, but by facing it head on, walking through it with courage and clarity and faith. Well, a while back, I had the unique privilege and opportunity to speak with Jordan face to face, not in an interview, but a real conversation. And in this episode, I want to share that experience with you, not just what we talked about, but what it stirred inside of me. And because if you're walking on the same road, trying to become the best man, leader, husband, and father that you can be, I suspect it might stir something in you too. My conversation with Dr. Peterson, uh, as you can imagine, was an important moment in my professional journey. And truly, it's right up there with recently having his good friend Jonathan Pageau on my podcast to talk about faith and memory and healing. And as many of you know, my life's work closely echoes that of Dr. Peterson because it focuses on psychology and faith and guiding men toward personal and professional breakthrough. And so, given this reality, meeting him face to face was truly an honor. I think back on it, and it was truly an extraordinary evening. So, I'm sitting in this sold out arena, and I had a front row seat, literally in the first row, for hearing Dr. Peterson lecture as part of his We Who Wrestle with God tour. Cain and Abel, Noah and the Ark, Carl Jung, totalitarianism, Jesus, masculinity. Like a mighty river, his words were ebbing and flowing throughout a variety of topics, meandering back and forth, and then ultimately converging in deep and meaningful and thought-provoking connections. And watching him improvise, and for those of you who have seen him in person, seen him live, you know what I mean here. But to see him think out loud and work through these deep and difficult topics in real time felt like watching some kind of world-class composer or painter or jazz musician in action. And if the night had ended there, it would have been a good night. I would have been a happy man. But before long, I would meet Dr. Peterson face to face. Well, after his standing ovation ended and the crowd dispersed, a smaller group of us were taken around the back to a closed off meeting to meet Dr. Peterson. And honestly, I've always been somewhat annoyed by the celebrity worship in our country. I've never been a big autograph guy just because I guess from a faith perspective, I know that only God is the one we should idolize, and sometimes we elevate people too highly. And yet, I think it's important to have heroes. It's important to have people to emulate, to look up to, and to inspire us. And so when Jordan entered the room, I confess I did feel a little starstruck. After watching hundreds of hours of this man's content, you kind of feel like you get to know the guy. It's a strange dynamic because hundreds, thousands of people feel like they know him, and yet, from his perspective, we're just another person, one of many, right? And so to see him face to face was a little surreal. But before long, I was able to look the man in the eye, to shake his hand, and to express my gratitude and tell him about myself, that I was a therapist. Um, and he was gracious enough to ask about my practice. I was able to share with him that it was going really well, being so excited about Lion counseling, what we're doing here. And I shared that I was also a poet and an artist and had even written him a poem that was inspired by his life and work. And he accepted it graciously, and I was able to thank him for being the man that he is. And so after all the photos and small talk, we settled in for a private question and answer session. And I knew that his time was valuable. And so I was surprised and honored when he chose me as of all the people there, as only one of three individuals to have a personal conversation with. I shared with him that as a therapist who leads a team of therapists, we try our best to speak the truth, and in that theological sense, try to carry our cross into the suffering of others. And these were both themes that he touched on in his lecture, which was so powerful. Um, but I expressed to him that we deal with a lot of trauma, right, and that by doing so, there's always this risk of vicarious trauma, meaning that we could be traumatized ourselves by hearing these stories. And so I asked him point blank, one clinician to another, one man to another man, what advice would you give me and my team for how we could help traumatized people going through different struggles, going through different hurts and insecurities, these men that I work with at Lion every day. How can I do this? How can we do this without falling into the pit ourselves, without being traumatized ourselves? And so, in good Dr. Peterson fashion, he paused, as he often does, internalizing the conversation and the question. And he nodded his head in acknowledgement and then shared with me some hard earned wisdom. And much of this, as a therapist, I already knew. And yet, in classic Jordan Peterson fashion, he had a unique way of driving the points home, which gave them a new resonance. First of all, he described the importance of not slipping into the trap of taking too much credit for a client's successes in therapy. And this is important because doing so robs them of coming to their own conclusions and healing in their own unique way. And it's a package deal. If you take too much credit for someone else's success, well, guess what? You also have to take credit for their failures, including those that are, in his words, catastrophic. It's their journey. It's their journey, he exclaimed. He then warned me that talented therapists should be especially careful because when they inevitably find strategies that work, they can easily become overconfident in these strategies, leading to a dangerous form of pride. And his words rang true. Um, as a man myself who's had a fair amount of success working with high achieving men, I'm a pretty driven person. I'm an entrepreneur. I have lofty goals in life. And while I try to stay centered in God's will and try to think about the ways that I can help others and the bigger impact that I can have for his kingdom, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a danger in success. As the saying goes, pride comes before the fall. And so his words continue to be a good reminder to remain vigilant and to not let pride sneak up on me. And I know for many of you guys listening, that's also a temptation that you have to contend with, and something that you have to sort through: how to be confident in what you do, how to be a competitor in what you do, and how to not let that confidence become a pride or an arrogance that leads to a downfall. So that was the first part of our conversation. The second part focused on resentment. Dr. Peterson went on to describe for me that how, and again, he's talking specifically to me as a therapist here, but he said for us as therapists, paying attention to the resentment that we feel inside serves as an incredibly important way to gauge when things are out of balance with a client. The presence of resentment towards clients, towards the other men that we work with, um, gets things out of balance, basically. It indicates to the therapist that, in the words of Dr. Peterson, it's time to quote unquote grow the hell up and recognize that resentment is the destructive poison when we let it fester, right? It poisons us from the inside out. And second, it beckons us to recognize that resentment is the body's way of telling us something important. It's telling us that there are boundaries that are being violated and that these boundary violations are hurting us. This holds true not only for therapeutic relationships, but for our personal relationships and our business relationships as well. He then shared a personal story from his own practice, describing how he learned to take ownership for his own decisions as a therapist. And he gave the specific example of how, when he's working with clients, he would have that decision of whether or not to give out his cell phone number for emergencies. And he realized that if he did this, he relinquished the right to blame the client later if they actually called him. If they interrupted his dinner, if they called him in the middle of the night, he had no right to complain because he gave them the number. And if he didn't want to be called after hours, then he had to figure out another plan. No excuses. No woe is me. Not surprisingly, Dr. Jordan Peterson was advising me and my team to take personal responsibility for our choices. In hindsight, not a big surprise, right? So to close off our conversation, to bring things full circle, I was struck by the compassion in Jordan's eyes, where he validated for me that while providing good therapy will indeed be sharing in the suffering of others, that it was so important to remember to keep our hearts at arm's length, to avoid falling into the client's pain too deeply, emphasizing that, in his words, a little compassion goes a long way, man. And I think Jordan was recognizing that we live in a culture that has emphasized compassion in some ways almost to a fault, a compassion that's limitless, without boundaries and without truth. And that actually is not a virtue, it's actually destructive. Oh, deep breath. Just retelling the story now, I still get the chills thinking about what a powerful experience that was, talking with Jordan, and and how that became a pivotal moment in my professional development and a door opening that led to other good things in my career and in my personal life. And so overall, incredible night. And now that some time has passed, I'm curious about whether or not he actually got around to opening that thing I wrote him, that poem that was inspired by his work. And if so, I hope it was a blessing to him. Um, and if you'd like to hear that, hang on till the end because I will read it. I promise. But first, I want to take these lessons from Jordan and make them practical for you. Many of the clients, many of my clients find me because this is kind of interesting. They would actually, let's be honest, rather schedule their counseling session with Dr. Jordan Peterson himself. Uh, but what they all find as they do their Google searches or AI searches is that no, Dr. Peterson understandably does not see clients clinically anymore. He's got other things he feels called to, other things he's doing. And so at first they feel out of luck. And so they continue their search for a therapist like Dr. Peterson. And then they find me. And no, I'm not a Jordan Peterson clone. I am not trying to become a Jordan Peterson robot. There are definitely some differences in who we are and how we practice, for sure. My style of listening is different from his. The way I conceptualize and treat trauma, specifically as a certified EMDR therapist, is very different from what he does. But obviously, there's significant overlap. And there are parts of Dr. Peterson's approach that I've adopted as core to my practice. For example, the importance of embracing personal responsibility. So, back to the wisdom Jordan shared with me. Right now, if you'd like to go through a little exercise with me here, like to kind of put something into practice, um, I'd like you to take a moment and just close your eyes. If you're not driving right now, if you're not going on a jog or working out, which a lot of the guys who listen to me do, but if you're in a safe space, a safe place to safely close your eyes, do so and think about this concept of resentment that me and Jordan talked about, and specifically, who in your life gives you that feeling of bitterness or resentment. Just think about it. Whose face pops into your mind? If Jordan's correct in his assessment that holding resentment means you're actually allowing someone to violate your boundaries, and let's take a look at that. That person in your mind, what have you allowed them to do? What boundaries have you allowed them to cross? And here's another question. What would happen to the anger and resentment if you actually took complete ownership for your decision to allow them to do it? What would happen if you gave up your right to be angry? Does it turn back towards yourself? And if so, you have two choices: accept your decision and live with it, or make a different choice, even if the option doesn't feel great, even if it doesn't feel like a valid choice. It's still your choice. Let's make it concrete. Here's an example. For those business leaders or entrepreneurs, small business owners out there, imagine your employee who's a pretty good employee, but he keeps leaving early from work to say coach his son's little league team. You know, deep down, it's great that this guy's a family man. He's trying to make time for what matters, but they're just assuming it's okay. They're making it a pattern of leaving work too early. They're leaving work unfinished. And as a result, you're picking up the slack. And you can feel inside the resentment building, the poisonous feeling in the gut, the negative thoughts spiraling through your mind. But now you try to take Dr. Peterson's advice to heart. You take radical ownership for your decision to let them leave early. Yes, let them leave early, and think, it was my choice. If you tell him he can't go to his son's ball games, then you're a micromanager. No, it's not a choice. I can't do that. Oh, you're against his family. Oh, you're a mean boss. These are the things we tell ourselves to convince ourselves it's not really a choice. Wrong. It's still a choice. It's a choice to make him stay. It's a choice to let him leave. It's a choice to let it go. And it's a choice to have a hard conversation about expectations. And then, as a grown man, he'd have a choice about whether or not to respect your decision or not, to modify his behavior or to find a new job. And that would be his choice. It's always a choice. You're a grown man, not a victim. Resentment is embracing a victim mentality. Blaming others is a weakness. Radical ownership, on the other hand, is a strength. I know this to be true. Jordan knows this. Warriors like Navy SEAL Jocko Willink know this. The Stoics from of old knew this. And yes, Jesus knew this truth, and he lived it out. And on the outside, Jesus did look at times like a victim, right? He looked like a failed Messiah, but Jesus was no victim. In John's gospel, he states, No one, no one takes it from me. His life he's referring to here. No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have the authority to lay it down and the authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. No, we're not Jesus, but we can strive to follow his example. Could it be that simple? Could radical ownership and personal responsibility in the big and the small decisions of life actually cure our resentment and bitterness and help us guard against burnout and lead us to deeper strength and integrity? The answer, of course, is yes. There's a lot to gain here. So, my fellow lions, why don't we do it? Well, often we don't do it because of what we'd have to face or because of what we'd have to give up. We'd have to face our own weakness and cowardice because owning our decisions can mean facing conflict. It can mean the need for assertiveness. It can mean an agonizing process of discerning what the correct path forward actually looks like. And it's not easy. And potentially giving up our resentments means having to face our own securities, our insecurities and fears within us that are all too often kept at bay by avoiding the conflict, by swallowing hard, complying, and saying yes, uh, even though our body is screaming no. In order to give up resentment, we might have to face quite a lot. And we'd also have to give some things up. Letting go of resentment means we'd have to give up the feeling of self-righteousness. And we'd have to give up our right to complain and to blame others. We'd have to give up our right to revenge and retaliation. We'd have to give up a lot. But when we give up the anger and the resentment and the bitterness, we experience not only that power and that freedom that comes with that, but also something that feels a lot like peace and a lot like forgiveness. Because after all, forgiveness is much more than just saying words. It's actually laying down the weapons of anger and bitterness, and instead taking up that sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, which commands us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. Forgiveness means wishing the best for the other person. This is not weakness, brothers. This is strength. And don't get me wrong, there are things worth fighting for in life. And strength and boundaries can coexist with forgiveness. You can forgive your employee for being a jerk and release that resentment and put him on an improvement plan. You can forgive your employee and pray that he has a wonderful, bright future. And you can let him go. You can fire him if necessary. You can take action, brothers, but you don't have to live with poison in your heart. You don't have to carry around the emotions that make your blood boil and your blood pressure rise. And you can learn to be the type of leader who lets his yes be yes and his no be no. And to know that at the end of the day, the only guy responsible for these decisions is the one staring back at you in the mirror. So the question, what? What if? What if radical ownership and personal responsibility were actually the key to strength and integrity? What if they freed us from the resentment and shielded us from burnout? What if they embodied the noble path God has laid before us? I think we know the answer, fellow Lions. My challenge to you this week is to put it into practice. In summary, step one, embrace radical ownership and personal responsibility. And this means refusing to blame anyone. Everything is a choice. Own it. Step two, identify anyone in your life you're holding resentment against. Write down their names. Write down the boundaries that they've crossed and how it's impacted you. Let's be real. And step three, decide what you're going to do about it. For each person on that list, write a corresponding action that you're going to take. It might be a difficult conversation. It might be forgiving them. It might be setting a boundary, or it might be choosing to accept the situation as it is. But again, here's the key, giving up the right to complain about it. Because after all, you're choosing to accept it because the other alternatives feel like less desirable choices. And finally, step four, pray for God's guidance. I know we're coming from different backgrounds here, but I know a lot of you guys out there who listen to us are men of faith, and uh, and so pray for God's guidance as you imperfectly put these things into practice, and pray for God's strength to keep practicing these skills until they become a habit, and pray for God's grace, His grace to know that your dad in heaven loves you and forgives you, and yes, is proud of you for stepping up to the plate and taking the hard path. All right. So to close, here's that poem that I wrote for Dr. Peterson. It's titled Crossing the Jordan by Mark Odlin. He ascends from the abyss of ancestral pain, tattooed on his bones by books like Cain. In his mortal body, he holds vibrations of trauma. In his immortal soul, he unfolds the archetypal drama. Still, he climbs, dirt under his nails, and our blindness falls from our eyes like scales. Heaven chiseled hearts through truthful speech, a suffering Savior, now just within reach. Ablaze with love, he climbs still higher, battling our hell like a raging fire. Thank you, Dr. Peterson, for inspiring me and for so many of my listeners out there. I hope we can meet again soon and deepen our conversation. All right, fellow Lions. Thanks for listening today. If you've hung on this long, subscribe now to support the channel and help us get the word out to more men. And feel free to drop a comment below. Let me know how Jordan Peterson impacted your life. I read all the comments, and I'd love to connect with you guys on these important topics. Keep the conversation going. Well, that's all I got for today. God bless, and talk to you soon, guys.